The camera kept rolling when the stuntman flew past his crash mat and slammed shoulder first into the concrete base of the lighting rig on the rooftop set in Kowloon. Notice this moment carefully, because the choice Bruce Lee makes before the director can yell "cut" will cost him either the studio's trust or his own conscience, and he won't be able to keep both. The rooftop was 7 stories above the crowded Hong Kong street, and the afternoon sun beat down on 32 crew members who had been working since dawn. They were shooting a fight sequence for a film that didn't have a title yet, just a production number and a release date that the studio had already announced to theaters across Southeast Asia. The air was thick with humidity, and the smell of tar from the rooftop surface mixed with cigarette smoke from the grips taking their break near the equipment trucks. Bruce was the star, the choreographer, and according to the contract he had signed 3 months earlier, the person responsible for making sure every punch and kick looked real enough to sell tickets. Write in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it right now? The stuntman's name was Jackie Fong. He was 26 years old, built like a middleweight boxer, with a reputation for taking hits that would send other men to the hospital. He had doubled for actors in 14 films, and he had never once complained about pain or asked for a safety adjustment. That was why the stunt coordinator had chosen him for this particular gag, a flying sidekick from Bruce that would send Jackie backward over a stack of wooden crates and onto a crash mat positioned against the far wall of the rooftop set. The first 2 takes had gone perfectly. Bruce's kick connected with Jackie's crossed forearms. Jackie sold the impact with his whole body, and he landed square in the center of the mat with a thud that sounded impressive on the audio track. The camera captured every detail: the sweat flying from Jackie's hair, the dust rising from the mat, the slight bend in Bruce's knee as he recovered from the kick. The director, a chain-smoking man named Raymond Kwan, who wore sunglasses even in the shade, had watched both takes on the monitor and shaken his head. "The landing looks too soft," Raymond said. "The audience won't believe he's hurt. Move the mat back 2 feet and have him fall harder." That was the instruction that changed everything. 2 feet doesn't sound like much, but on a rooftop set with concrete flooring and metal equipment scattered everywhere, 2 feet was the difference between safety and disaster. The stunt coordinator, a veteran named Uncle Young, who had been doing this work since before Bruce was born, hesitated before nodding and directing 2 grips to reposition the mat. Bruce watched the adjustment with narrowed eyes. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't articulate exactly what it was. The mat was still there, blue and padded, and seemingly adequate. Jackie was still ready, bouncing lightly on his feet the way stuntmen do to keep their muscles warm. The sun was still bright, casting hard shadows across the rooftop, and Raymond was already calling for the next take, his voice sharp with the impatience of a man who saw the afternoon light fading and the schedule slipping away from him. Listen to what happens next, because this is the moment when instinct and protocol collided, and Bruce had to choose which one to trust. Action. Bruce launched the kick, his foot connected with Jackie's forearms, exactly as it had twice before. Jackie's body flew backward, arms pinwheeling, face contorted in the exaggerated grimace that stuntmen learned to produce on command. He sailed over the crates, his trajectory perfect, his timing precise. And then he missed the mat. It wasn't by much, maybe 8 inches, maybe a foot, but it was enough. Jackie's shoulder hit the concrete first, followed by his hip, followed by the side of his head, glancing off the steel base of the lighting rig, with a sound that made everyone on the rooftop stop breathing. He didn't get up. He didn't move. He lay crumpled against the equipment like a puppet whose strings had been cut, and for 3 terrible seconds, nobody did anything. The camera kept rolling. That detail matters, because in the film industry, the camera always keeps rolling unless someone tells it to stop, and nobody had told it to stop yet. Bruce was already moving. He crossed the rooftop in 4 strides, dropping to his knees beside Jackie, his hands hovering over the stuntman's body without touching him. He had enough training to know that moving an injured person could make things worse. He had enough experience to know that the stillness of Jackie's body was a very bad sign. "Cut!" Bruce shouted. His voice echoed off the rooftop walls, loud enough to be heard 7 stories down on the street. "Cut the camera! Someone call for a doctor." Raymond Kwan lowered his sunglasses and stared at Bruce with an expression that was equal parts annoyance and confusion. "We're still rolling. The take isn't finished." "The take is finished," Bruce said without looking up. "The man is hurt. Turn off the camera. Stop for a second and understand what just happened." Bruce Lee, the star of the film, the person whose face would sell tickets, the man who had the most to lose if the production fell behind schedule, had just given a direct order to a director on his own set. In the hierarchy of Hong Kong film production, that was almost unheard of. Directors gave orders, stars followed them. That was how things worked. But Bruce wasn't thinking about hierarchy. He was thinking about the man lying motionless on the concrete beside him, and he was thinking about the 2-foot adjustment that should never have been made. Uncle Yung appeared at Bruce's side, his weathered face pale beneath his tan. Bruce placed 2 fingers against Jackie's neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, faint, rapid, but present. "He's alive, but he's not conscious. We need medical help now." One of the grips was already running toward the rooftop access door, presumably to find a phone. The camera operator had finally stopped rolling and was standing behind his equipment with his hands at his sides, unsure what to do. The rest of the crew had formed a loose semicircle around the fallen stuntman, close enough to watch, but far enough to stay out of the way. Raymond Kwan pushed through the circle and looked down at Jackie with a detached assessment of a man calculating costs. "How bad is it?" "I don't know," Bruce said. "I'm not a doctor." But he hit his head on the steel, and he's not waking up. That's bad enough. We have 3 more setups to shoot today. The light is going to change in 2 hours. Bruce looked up at Raymond for the first time since the accident. His eyes were cold in a way that made several crew members take a step back. "Then you'll shoot them without me. I'm not leaving this man until the medics arrive." "Wait, because what happens in the next hour will test everything Bruce Lee believes about responsibility, loyalty, and the price of doing the right thing when everyone around you wants you to do the easy thing." The medics arrived in 23 minutes. An eternity on a film set where every minute costs money. They were 2 men in white shirts with a stretcher and a medical bag, and they moved with the efficient urgency of people who had seen injuries like this before. They checked Jackie's pupils, his pulse, his responsiveness. They immobilized his neck with a foam collar. They lifted him onto the stretcher with careful, coordinated movements. "He needs to go to Queen Mary Hospital," one of the medics said. "Possible concussion, possible spinal injury. We won't know until they do scans." Bruce nodded. "I'm coming with him." Raymond stepped forward. "You can't leave. We have a schedule." "Then change the schedule. The studio won't accept delays. They'll pull funding. Then let them." Bruce's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath the words. "A man is going to the hospital because of something that happened on my set during my scene, because of an adjustment I should have stopped. I'm going with him. You can fire me, you can sue me, you can tell the studio whatever you want, but I'm going." Notice what Bruce just did. He didn't blame Uncle Yung for moving the mat. He didn't blame Raymond for ordering the change. He took responsibility for something that wasn't entirely his fault, because he understood that leadership means owning the outcomes, not just the intentions. The stretcher disappeared through the rooftop access door, and Bruce followed it. Behind him, he could hear Raymond arguing with Uncle Yung, could hear the crew murmuring among themselves, could hear the sounds of a production falling apart in real time. He didn't look back. The ambulance ride took 18 minutes through traffic that seemed determined to block every intersection. Bruce sat in the back beside Jackie's stretcher, watching the stuntman's chest rise and fall with shallow mechanical breaths. The medics had started an IV line and were monitoring his vitals on a portable machine that beeped with each heartbeat. "Is he going to be okay?" Bruce asked. The medic closest to him, a young man with tired eyes, shrugged. "Head injuries are unpredictable. Sometimes people walk away from falls like this. Sometimes they don't walk again. We'll know more after the scans." Bruce looked at Jackie's face. Even unconscious, even bruised, he looked young. 26 years old, 14 films, a career built on taking punishment, so that actors like Bruce could look heroic without getting hurt. Here's something you need to understand about the stunt industry in Hong Kong in those years. Safety regulations were suggestions, not requirements. Crash mats were luxuries, not necessities. Stuntmen were expected to fall, to bleed, to break bones, and to show up for work the next day ready to do it again. It was a system that produced spectacular action sequences and shattered bodies in roughly equal measure. Bruce benefited from that system too. His films were famous for their fight scenes precisely because the stuntmen made everything look real. But sitting in the back of that ambulance, watching Jackie Fong breathe through a machine, Bruce started to wonder if the system was worth the cost. The hospital was chaos. Queen Mary was one of the busiest medical centers in Hong Kong, and the emergency department was overflowing with patients on stretchers lining the hallways. Families crowded into plastic chairs, nurses moving between crises with clipboard efficiency and exhausted eyes. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows across the linoleum floor. Jackie was wheeled through a set of double doors marked "Authorized Personnel Only," and Bruce was left standing in the waiting area with nothing to do but wait. The clock on the wall showed 4:47 p.m. He watched the second hand move in its endless circle and tried not to think about all the ways this day could have ended differently. He found a payphone in the corner and called the production office. The line rang 4 times before a harried-sounding assistant answered. "This is Bruce Lee. I need to speak with Mr. Kwan." There was a pause. Then Raymond's voice came through the receiver. "Where are you?" "Queen Mary Hospital. Jackie is being examined. I'll stay until I know he's stable." The studio called. "They're not happy. I didn't expect them to be." Listen to what Raymond says next, because it reveals exactly how the industry viewed situations like this one. "They want to know if we can use the footage from the accident. They think it might work for the final cut. Make the fight look more realistic." Bruce felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You're asking me if we can use footage of a man being seriously injured to sell movie tickets?" "I'm telling you what the studio asked. I didn't say I agreed with it." "And what did you tell them?" Another pause. "I told them I'd ask you." Bruce closed his eyes. The fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room hummed overhead. Somewhere nearby, a child was crying. The smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner hung in the air like a reminder that this was a place where people came when things went wrong. "Tell them no," Bruce said. "Tell them if they use that footage, I walk. Not just from this film, from every film they ever want to make with me. Tell them that a man's injury is not a marketing opportunity. Tell them that if they can't understand the difference between entertainment and exploitation, they don't deserve to be in this business." He hung up before Raymond could respond. Stop here and picture Bruce Lee standing alone in that hospital waiting room. The biggest star in Hong Kong cinema. The man whose name could guarantee box office success. And he had just threatened to end his relationship with the studio over a piece of footage that most people would never even notice. That's the kind of decision that defines a person. Not the public statements, not the interviews, not the carefully crafted image. The decisions made in fluorescent-lit waiting rooms when nobody is watching. 2 hours passed. Bruce sat in a plastic chair and watched the doors through which Jackie had disappeared. He didn't read the magazines on the table beside him. He didn't make conversation with the other people waiting. He just sat, and waited, and thought about all the ways the day could have gone differently. If he had spoken up when Raymond ordered the mat moved, if he had insisted on one more rehearsal before the take, if he had been paying closer attention to the angle of Jackie's trajectory, if. A doctor emerged through the double doors, a woman in her 40s with gray-streaked hair and an expression that gave nothing away. She scanned the waiting room until her eyes landed on Bruce. "Mr. Lee, I understand you came in with Mr. Fong." Bruce stood. "How is he?" "He has a moderate concussion and a dislocated shoulder. We've reset the shoulder and given him medication for the swelling in his brain. He's conscious now, and he's asking for you." The relief that flooded through Bruce was so intense, it made his knees weak. Conscious, asking for him. Not paralyzed, not brain damaged, not dead. "Can I see him?" The doctor nodded and led him through the double doors, down a corridor lined with curtained examination bays, to a small room at the end of the hall. Jackie Fong was propped up in a hospital bed, his right arm in a sling, a bandage wrapped around his head, but his eyes were open and tracking Bruce as he entered. "Sifu," Jackie said. His voice was hoarse, but there was a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You didn't have to come." Bruce pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. "Yes, I did. The director must be furious. The director can manage his own emotions. How do you feel?" Jackie shifted slightly and winced, like I fell off a building and hit a lighting rig, which now that I think about it, is exactly what happened. He laughed, then grimaced, as the movement aggravated his headache. The mat was too far. I knew it as soon as I started falling, but by then it was too late to adjust. Wait, because what Jackie says next will change how Bruce thinks about the entire stunt industry. "It's not your fault, Sifu. I've been doing this for years. I know the risks. Every stuntman knows the risks. We take the falls, so the stars don't have to. That's the job." Bruce shook his head slowly. "That's the job as it exists now. It doesn't have to be the job forever." Jackie looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the system is broken. We ask men like you to risk your bodies, your health, your lives, so that men like me can look good on screen. And when something goes wrong, when the mat is moved 2 feet, when the timing is off, when a stuntman hits concrete instead of padding, we call it an accident and keep filming. That's not acceptable. It's how things have always been done. Then maybe it's time to do things differently." Notice what's happening in this conversation. Bruce Lee isn't just expressing sympathy for an injured colleague. He's articulating a philosophy that will shape how he approaches every film he makes from this point forward. Safety isn't an inconvenience to be managed. It's a responsibility to be honored. Jackie was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The other stuntmen won't like it. They'll say you're making them look weak. They'll say you're trying to take away their jobs. They can say whatever they want. I'd rather have angry stuntmen than dead ones." Bruce stayed with Jackie for another hour, talking about nothing important, films they had seen, restaurants they liked, the traffic in Kowloon that seemed to get worse every year. It was the kind of conversation that builds trust, the kind that reminds two people that they're human beings first and professionals second. When a nurse finally came to check Jackie's vitals and suggested that the patient needed rest, Bruce stood and put a hand on Jackie's uninjured shoulder. "When you're recovered," Bruce said, "come back to the set, not as a stuntman, as a consultant. I want you to help me design fight sequences that look real without putting anyone in the hospital." Jackie's eyes widened. "You're serious?" "I'm always serious about the things that matter." The sun was setting by the time Bruce left Queen Mary Hospital. The Hong Kong skyline was painted in shades of orange and purple, the harbor glittering with the lights of boats and buildings coming alive for the evening. A ferry horn sounded in the distance, low and mournful. He stood on the hospital steps for a moment, breathing in the humid evening air, letting the tension of the day slowly drain from his shoulders. His shirt was still damp with sweat from the rooftop set, and his legs ached from hours of sitting in plastic chairs. His car was still at the studio, which meant he needed to find a taxi. But before he could raise his hand to flag one down, a black sedan pulled up to the curb, and the back door opened. Raymond Kwan was sitting inside. "Get in. We need to talk." Bruce hesitated, then climbed into the car. The driver pulled away from the hospital without being told where to go, which meant this conversation had been planned. "The studio called again," Raymond said. He was still wearing his sunglasses, even though the sun was almost gone. "They're willing to forget about today. They'll pay for Jackie's medical bills. They'll give you an extra day to reshoot the scene. All they want in return is for you to apologize for causing a disruption on set." Here's the moment of truth. The studio was offering Bruce an easy way out. Apologize, move on, pretend nothing happened. It was the kind of compromise that the film industry ran on. Small surrenders that added up to a culture where nothing ever changed. Bruce looked out the window at the passing city. "And if I don't apologize, then they'll make things difficult. They'll talk to other studios. They'll suggest that you're hard to work with. They'll make sure everyone knows that Bruce Lee puts his principles above his professionalism." "Good." Raymond lowered his sunglasses and stared at Bruce. "Good? If that's what they say about me, then at least they'll be telling the truth. I do put my principles above my professionalism. I put human safety above shooting schedules. I put the lives of the people who work on my films above the convenience of the people who finance them. If that makes me difficult to work with, then maybe this industry needs more difficult people." The car was silent for a long moment. Then Raymond did something unexpected. He laughed. "You know," he said, "when I started directing, I thought the same way. I thought I could change things. I thought I could make films that were both successful and safe. But the system wore me down. The deadlines, the budgets, the pressure from above. After a while, you stop fighting and start surviving. That's your choice," Bruce said. "It doesn't have to be mine." Raymond nodded slowly. "No, I suppose it doesn't." The sedan dropped Bruce at his apartment building. As the last light faded from the sky, the street was quieter now. The daytime crowds replaced by couples walking to restaurants and old men playing chess under street lamps. He climbed the stairs to his unit, unlocked the door, and stood for a moment in the darkness of his living room, listening to the sounds of the city filtering through the open window. If you followed this story to this point, you understand that what happened on that rooftop wasn't just an accident. It was a collision between two ways of seeing the world. One way said that progress required sacrifice, that success demanded risk, that the show must go on, regardless of the cost. The other way said that people matter more than products, that safety isn't a luxury, that the measure of a leader is how he treats the most vulnerable people in his care. Bruce Lee chose the second way, not because it was easy. It wasn't. Not because it was popular. It wasn't. But because it was right. The following week, Bruce returned to the rooftop set. The crew was waiting, uncertain what to expect. Raymond was there with his sunglasses and his cigarettes. Uncle Young was there with his weathered face and his careful eyes. And Jackie Fong was there, his arms still in a sling, standing beside the camera instead of in front of it. Bruce gathered everyone in a circle and spoke. "What happened last week was preventable. A man was seriously hurt because we prioritized speed over safety. That's going to change. From now on, every stunt on this production will be rehearsed until everyone involved is confident it can be done without injury. If anyone stuntman, actor, crew member feels unsafe, they have the right to stop the scene. No questions asked, no consequences." He paused, scanning the faces around him. "Some of you might think this will slow us down. You're right, it will. But I'd rather make a film that takes twice as long and hurts nobody than a film that comes in on schedule and sends someone to the hospital. That's not a compromise I'm willing to make." The crew exchanged glances. Some of them looked skeptical. Some of them looked relieved. A few of them, the ones who had been in the industry longest, who had seen the most injuries, who carried the most scars, looked at Bruce with something that might have been hope. Uncle Young stepped forward. "What about the studio? They won't like delays. The studio will accept what I give them," Bruce said, "and what I give them will be worth the wait." Raymond lit a cigarette and exhaled slowly. "All right, let's see if this works." This worked. Not perfectly, not immediately, but gradually. The reshoots took 3 extra days, but the fight sequences were cleaner, sharper, more controlled. The stuntmen, knowing that their safety was being prioritized, took more creative risks because they trusted the system protecting them. And when the film was finally released 6 months later, critics praised its action scenes as some of the most realistic ever captured on camera. Nobody knew that the realism came not from danger, but from its absence. If you want to hear about another moment when Bruce Lee faced a choice between what was easy and what was right, a night in his dojo when a stranger's challenge forced him to question everything he taught about control, tell me in the comments. And while you're there, let me know, have you ever had to stand alone for something you believed in? Some fights aren't won with fists. They're won with decisions, small choices, made in difficult moments, that add up to a life worth living. Bruce Lee understood that. He proved it on a rooftop in Kowloon, standing over a fallen stuntman, while the cameras kept rolling. He proved it in a hospital waiting room, refusing to let a man's injury become entertainment. He proved it in a black sedan, telling a studio executive that his principles weren't for sale. And somewhere in Hong Kong, on film sets, where men and women still risk their bodies to create magic on screen, his legacy continues, not in the kicks, not in the speed, not in the legend, in the simple radical idea that every person matters, every single one, and that no shot, no scene, no film is worth forgetting that truth. That's the real lesson here. The willingness to stand up, the courage to say no, and the discipline to keep fighting for what matters, even when the whole world wants you to give in.